on the dietary diversity scoring. One of the indicators that need to be that we can think of incorporating in the minimum nutrition data set is the dietary diversity scoring. And I would like to introduce 5 students from Cornell who have been here for just 6 weeks. The first 2 weeks were spent getting to know the data set, getting to know people, getting to know the issue that they're going to study. And then they had 2 weeks in the field, harsh conditions, difficult, very tiring. They completed 150 interviews in 10 days. And then they came back, they had to record their data, they had to input their data, analyze it, come up with a report and a presentation. So I'm very proud to introduce these 5 interns who will be making a very good choreographed presentation today to give us the results of their findings of their survey and of the hard time that they have spent in the villages of Telangana and Maharashtra. So we have Amrita, we have Andy, Christian, Alex and Katie presenting to us, and each have a role in the presentation. It's a very well choreographed presentation. And I would like to say that it will be very interesting also to listen to their experiences as well as to see what the ground reality actually is pointing to us on the diversity in the diets of the rural poor in India. So over to them.
All right, welcome. My name is Nathaniel Cardova, and I just want to say thank you all for being here. And for the MIP department and all the great support that you all have given us. It's been a great time. I'm a Master of Public Administration candidate at the Cornell Institute for Public Affairs, and the rest of the team will introduce themselves as well.
Hi guys. Hi, my name's Andrew Pike. I'm an undergraduate at Cornell University and part of the TCI team. I am studying Applied Economics and Management with a minor in International Development.
Hi all, my name is Kathryn Merekel and I'm a candidate for a Master of Professional Studies degree at Cornell University in International Development, and I have a particular focus in gender and nutrition.
Hello, my name is Amrita and I just recently graduated from Cornell with a degree in Human Biology, Health and Society, and I'll be starting at Johns Hopkins in the fall for a master's program in epidemiology.
Hi, my name is DiRado-Ownes. I'm a Cornell University student, TCI team, and I'm studying development sociology.
Fantastic. So we're going to get started. This right here is a brief overview on what we're going to be presenting today. We're going to do a brief description of TCI as well as what the minimum nutrition data set for agriculture is. We'll go through the purpose of the dietary diversity module, run through our methods, talk about the data collection process, speak about the results, as well as a discussion and a comparison to the intensive nutrition survey scores. We'll also speak about the limitations of the study, as well as the generalizability, and also speak about some further areas of interest, namely the market level dietary diversity module. So the Tata Cornell Agriculture and Nutrition Initiative is a long-term research initiative focusing on the design and evaluation of innovative interventions. TCI has partnered with organizations across India with the aim of reducing rural childhood stunting and safeguarding cognitive and physical development. TCI also emphasizes supporting data collection, particularly regarding issues of agriculture, health, and nutrition. Recently, TCI has partnered with the Markets, Institutions, and Policies program here at ICRISAT to work on the minimum nutrition data set for agriculture pilot. The primary aim of the MNDA is to gather consensus on the most essential nutrition metrics for the inclusion into current and future longitudinal agricultural surveys. The current framework of the MNDA consists of 5 modules that are pictured here. Our team looks specifically at Module 3, which originally was defined as household level and market level dietary diversity and quality scoring. The other modules look at early childhood care, biochemical markers, and food allocation metrics, to name a few.
So our research purpose. Our purpose during our 6-week internship here at ICRISAT was to design a survey tool which can gather sufficient data to track both individual and household level dietary diversity, and which can also be easily integrated into existing agricultural surveys. Our purpose here was to develop, pilot test, and assess the validity of a dietary diversity module of the MNDA, Module 3, as Alex said, by comparing our collected and calculated dietary scores to those calculated by the Intensive Nutrition Survey. So why is the link between agriculture and nutrition important? Why do we want to add a nutrition assessment to agricultural surveys? Dr. Pingali touched on this in his seminar just now, but agriculture is important in food production and as a primary form of employment. It provides not only a direct source of food, but also a source of income to many Indians, which families can use to purchase foods. It plays a crucial role in determining food availability and access, dietary diversity, and overall nutrition. And recent papers have highlighted a direct association between farm income and food security. Despite this link, agricultural initiatives often fail to collect nutritional information, so the MNDA seeks to address this gap. Dietary diversity is a valuable measure of nutritional status in terms of both nutrient access and food security. So we wanted to collect individual level and household level dietary diversity. And this is because the individual level dietary diversity analysis is predictive of nutrient adequacy, while the household level dietary diversity analysis is predictive of household food security. And a clear relationship has been shown between dietary diversity scores and measured nutritional indices such as BMI, upper arm circumference, etc., showing that dietary diversity has promise in being used as a rapid measure to assess different aspects of nutritional status. Our methods. So in the next few slides, I will first say a little bit about the villages we studied, and then I will review the methodology we used and how we went about developing our survey instruments, getting to know our field investigators, running informal market surveys, and then Andy will elaborate on how we created our dietary diversity scores. So, as mentioned earlier, we surveyed a total of 4 villages. The 2 villages we studied in Telangana were Dokur and Orapale. Dokur is around 125 kilometers south of Hyderabad, and agriculture has been in the past a predominant occupation. However, because of recent changes, families have diversified to include non-farm labor, a significant proportion of which involves migration to Hyderabad for work. Orapale is 60 kilometers south of Hyderabad near the airport, and agriculture is still the central occupation in that village, the main crop being cotton. The 2 villages in Maharashtra were Kanzara and Kinked. 85% of generated income in Kanzara is from farming, while in Kinked much of the population is landless, and they have looked to other forms of income diversification, including migrating to nearby Murtijapur. So, in order to obtain rapid data on both individual and household dietary diversity, and this talks to your question earlier, Anna, about the methods that we used, we had to make 4 main choices: who in the family to interview, how long of a recall period to use, whether or not to include foods consumed in small quantities, and how to disaggregate mixed dishes. The woman responsible for cooking in the household was chosen as the respondent. Oh, sorry. This woman, between ages 18 and 45 years of age, would not only be able to recall what she ate herself, but also be able to speak to what she cooked for other family members, serving as the proxy for the household. With this choice, we were able to record everything that the woman ate as being part of the individual women's dietary diversity score, and whatever she ate, plus anything additional that the family ate, as being part of the household dietary diversity score. With this choice, we were able to capture 2 scores while only interviewing 1 respondent, which is part of capturing as much data with a minimum nutrition, with minimum input. We chose a 3-day recall period because while the respondent may find it easier to recall exactly what she ate yesterday, we worried that 24 hours might be insufficient to capture the variety of foods eaten by the individual and the household. We chose not to include food items for 2 reasons. First, that it's been shown that less than 1 teaspoon per serving skews dietary diversity for women of reproductive age, but also because capturing every little thing that the woman in the household consumed would not be a minimum assessment. We tackled the issue of disaggregating mixed dishes by agreeing to hold focus group discussions to understand what foods made up, what ingredients made up mixed dishes, and also including space in our survey design, which I'll show you in a second, to include the specific ingredients included by each woman when she was cooking. So this is just the front cover of our survey. You can see that there's instructions for who the respondent should be at the top, a place to record village name, respondent name, the timings of the interview, and whether or not the woman was pregnant or breastfeeding. We also included a space to record VLS household number so that we could later compare our respondent to the VLS data. This is the inside of our survey, so there'd be 1 page for each recall day. And as you can see, my chart is here. So over here is place to record if it was a special day of any kind. If the woman visited the market, if she was fasting, if she attended some sort of function, because that would affect what she consumed on that day. This top part is to include what the woman herself ate during the course of the day. So we probed by asking what she ate upon rising, all the things that she ate between 4 and 9 a.m. and then proceeded throughout the course of the day. In this bottom area of boxes, this was a place to include what other families of the member ate additionally. So all of the foods here would be included in the household dietary diversity score in addition to these. And then there's some questions at the bottom regarding consumption outside of the household, children's consumption and the individual woman's consumption. Okay. So again, to help us learn a little bit more about eating practices in the village, we held focus group discussions, 2 focus group discussions in each village, 1 mixed with men and women and 1 just with women. And we held these groups primarily to validate our food groups and determine common food items for later probing, and to familiarize ourselves with local dishes. So from an initial list of 40 questions, a concise list of 13 essential questions were chosen with the help of our ICRISAT friends. We began each discussion by asking questions about meal times and frequency. We probed for common foods eaten throughout the day and asked questions about cooking responsibilities to see if we could validate the use of the woman as a proxy for the household. We asked questions about meal preference, whether or not families ate the same foods, eating at the same time or together. And then we finished up our discussion with asking about cultural norms and food consumption during special events. Before beginning our actual data collection, we worked with the field investigators to get to know them, build a rapport, and familiarize them and ourselves with operationalizing the survey. This was really useful because when talking to them, we were able to sort out some of the problems that might occur in the field. So our data collection. At the start of each interview, we read a consent form that explained who we were, the purpose of our research, and that all information was strictly private. We probed for what the respondent ate and anything additional her family ate, as I showed you in the survey before. And the information each day, at the end of each recall day, was double-checked with the woman. Finally, and Alex will discuss this a lot more at the end of our presentation, we conducted informal market surveys in which we collected lists of available products based on observations we made at the local markets.
Okay, I'm going to cover creating the dietary diversity scores. So we input our data in Excel, and you'll see that spreadsheet soon. But to do this, we had to establish a list of the food ingredients we encountered in the surveys. and each ingredient was and the number of food items consumed by each respondent was given a dietary diversity score for both the 24 hours and the 3-day recall. And as many of you may know, the women's dietary diversity score was ranged from 0 to 9, and the household dietary diversity score ranges from 0 to 12. Now, this is our Excel spreadsheet, and I'll point out to you some things. So, there we go. So, this first column is the woman's consumption of a food item, and right here in this column we have all the different food items grouped by food groups, so like cereals, fish, pulses, etc. And if the woman ate the food, she would get a 1 or a 0 in this column. This next column is basically her source code, and so as mentioned earlier, the 6 sources were put here. If a woman happened to consume the same food from multiple sources, say the PDS and her own farm, we would code both those numbers with the lowest one starting first. Now this column here indicates whether or not the woman ate it within the last 24 hours, and this allows us to determine whether or not later in our analysis whether to do a 24-hour recall and a 3-day recall analysis. And now this fourth column is basically the household consumption. So anything that the woman ate would also be coded into this column. But as you remember from the survey instrument, there's an additional box at the bottom, and any extra foods would also be put in here with the same food group and with the same 24-hour recall period. And at the bottom of each food group, there's a total column, and if the food is present in the section, then it gets 1 mark, and then those marks are totaled at the end of the column at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Okay. And for our data input and analysis. So coming into this, into our analysis, we had 3 hypotheses, all right, and each testing a different aspect of our project. So our first hypothesis was testing our tool. Essentially, do the results of our 24-hour recall mirror the results of the VLS 24-hour recall? So our null hypothesis was that the MNDA would collect similar information as the VLS surveys. And to do this test, we tested our MNDA 24 hours versus the VLS 2014 data. And then our second test was comparing the recall period validation. So basically testing the 24 hours MNDA versus our 3-day MNDA. Are we seeing any differences in the data we collect in 24 hours and the data we're collecting over 3 days? So our null hypothesis was that the 3-day recall will collect the same information as the 24-hour recall. And then the third hypothesis was that we were testing the recall period and the tool validation. So this was testing the 3-day MNDA versus the VLS 2014 24-hour data. And our null hypothesis was that the MNDA 3-day recall will collect the same information as VLS 2014. Okay. All right, so why did we use the VLS 2014 as our baseline? So to those of you that aren't familiar with the VLS, data is collected using an intensive 24-hour recall for each household individual. This means that unlike with the MNDA, they capture portion sizes and all ingredients, no matter how small the quantity. Now, the woman's dietary diversity score is tailored to measure micronutrient adequacy of the diet, giving less weight to less micronutrient-dense food groups, such as the white roots and tubers, cereals, and non-vitamin A rich fruits and vegetables. So more weight are given to categories rich in iron, vitamin A, and other micronutrients. So these like dark leafy greens, organ meats, etc. And the scores for the WDDS, as mentioned earlier, they range from 0 to 9, with 9 being the most diverse diet possible. Now, for the HDDS, this indicates household access to foods and includes food items that are not necessarily rich in micronutrients. These include things like sweets, condiments, and beverages, and aggregates fruits and vegetables regardless of vitamin A content. This score ranges from 0 to 12. And so also, when we input the data, they were matched as pairs. And to do this, we had to drop three of our respondents. And the VLS 2014 was the most recent and complete data set. Okay, so these are the histograms and descriptive statistics of the results. And Katie, my colleague over here, is going to go over the significance of these in more detail later. So you can see there's a histogram for each color. So the WDDS for the MNDA 24 hours is in the top right corner in blue. For the 3-day, it's in the bottom right corner in green. And for VLS 2014, it's in the bottom left in red. And we had 135 respondents for all of these. And as you can see in the top right, in the corners of each of those, the means for the MNDA 24 hours was 4.36 with a standard deviation of 1.05. For the 3-day, it was 5.36 plus or minus 1.11. And for the VLS, it was 5.26 plus 0.83. Now, if you look at the shapes, the MNDA 24 hours is skewed to the right with a modal value of 4. We found with the kurtosis and the skew that it was significant, and the skew was 0.432 and the kurtosis was 3.838. The other two are normally distributed, and the center, the means are I've already touched on that, and as you can see in the MNDA, the spread is slightly larger with ranges from for 6 for both MNDA and 4 for the VLS 2014. Now, going to the HDDS, the household survey. Again, we surveyed the same 135 respondents, and we're seeing that the mean for the 24 hours was around 8 food groups with 1.05 standard deviation. With the 3-day, that increased to 9.3 food groups, and the standard deviation remains similar at 1.04. And VLS 2014 had a mean of 8 food groups with a standard deviation of 1. All 3 histograms have negative skews, and both MNDAs have significant kurtosis. And the ranges are 5 for the VLS 2014, and the MNDA 24 hours has a range of 6, and MNDA 3-day has a range of 8, but we had a low outlier of 4, and the range would be 5 otherwise. All right, my colleague Katie will now introduce the really interesting results. Oh, sorry. Data limitations. So we had a few limitations when looking at these data. So as touched upon earlier, our data was collected in July of 2014, but the VLS 2014 data was collected in February to April 2014. Ideally, for a future study, both data would be, the VLS and MNDA would be using data collected in the same period to really analyze the correlation. The household dietary diversity scores are calculated differently with the MNDA and VLS. With the MNDA, we add the women's raw score. The women's raw score is found, and then additional food consumed by the household is then added, and then we calculate HDDS from that. However, with the VLS, our raw score is calculated for each individual. The foods are grouped according to the individual dietary diversity score, which is the same formula as the household dietary diversity score, and then these combined individual scores are averaged to calculate a household dietary diversity score, and we saw some differences in the results, which will be touched upon later.
Thank you, Andrew. We are now going to move on to talk about the results. This is really the meat of our analysis and what we've been doing for basically for the past 2 weeks entirely. So throughout this section, I will be discussing our tool as the 24-hour recall of the MNDA, And we did this as our base tool because the recall period is the same as the VLS survey. So to avoid confounding recall period along with tool, we're going to start by comparing the 24-hour MNDA recall to the 24-hour VLS 2014 recall. So the first hypothesis that we needed to test was the tool validation, which is a comparison of the 24-hour MNDA to the 2014 VLS. So we'll start with the Women's Dietary Diversity Score. We ran a paired t-test, which we were able to do because we had the advantage of matching individuals to their VLS score and the MNDA score based on their household ID. The results of our paired t-test, which compares the means, finds that indeed the means are significantly different. So from this we are able to reject our null hypothesis that the MNDA 24 hours for the Women's Dietary Diversity Score collects similar information as the VLS 2014 Women's Dietary Diversity Score. In the lower left-hand column here we have some overlaid histograms. The VLS 2014 are the red outlines, whereas the purple filled-in columns are the MNDA 24 hours. Although these numbers are not on this slide, we find that the 24 hours is significantly positively skewed and also has a significant kurtosis from normal, whereas the VLS 2014 is not significantly different from normal. The standard deviations between these two distributions are significantly different, and based on the t-test plus these differences in skewness, kurtosis, and standard deviation, we determine that the MNDA 24 hours for the Women's Dietary Diversity Score and the VLS 2014 for the Women's Dietary Diversity Score are not collecting the same information. So then we make the same comparison with the Household Dietary Diversity Score. Unlike the Women's Dietary Diversity Score, in the paired t-test, we find that the means are actually not significantly different, with a p-value of 0.8258. Because of this, we fail to reject the null hypothesis that these two surveys are collecting similar information. And when we go down to the histogram, we find that they are both significantly negatively skewed and both have a kurtosis greater than 3, although, so instead a kurtosis of 3 is a normal kurtosis. But only the MNDA has a kurtosis that's significantly different from normal. We also find that the standard deviations are not significantly different, and based on this collection of results, we find that the MNDA 24 hours and the VLS 2014 for the Household Dietary Diversity Score are collecting the same information. So this is in contrast to the WDDS of these two surveys where they are collecting different information. The next hypothesis that we move on to test is the recall period validation. So this is where we test our 24-hour recall versus our 3-day recall. We find that the means are significantly different in a paired t-test. So this suggests that we are collecting different information and that recall period does matter. We reject the null that the 3-day is collecting the same information as the 24 hours. And if we look at the histograms, we find that they're both significantly different from normal. The 24 hours is significantly different from normal for skewedness and kurtosis, and the MNDA is not significantly different from normal. So they have different distributions. The t-test indicates that the means are different, and so we conclude that they are not collecting the same information. We also ran this test for the HDDS and found basically the same thing, that the means are not significantly different, that the means are significantly different, as you can see the p-value of less than 0.0000. And although in the histogram both of the distributions are significantly different from normal in skewness and kurtosis, they are not significantly different in standard deviation, but based on the t-test, we conclude that they are also not collecting the same information. So this is important because for both the WDDS and the HDDS, we find that the 24-hour versus the 3-day recall creates significantly different scores, and the recall period does play a role in the resulting scores. Finally, we move on to the combined recall period and tool validation. So with these comparisons, we have to take into account that we are comparing across a lot of unknown variables. We're comparing both different recall periods and different tools. So we're expecting to have a lot of error that, given the intensity of our analysis of these, we aren't able to take into account. But on the surface, we can analyze the means through a paired t-test again, and find, interestingly, that the means are not significantly different for the WDDS. So this is in comparison to the 24-hour WDDS versus the VLS 2014 WDDS, which found that the means were significantly different. So the 3-day recall for the WDDS is much more similar to the VLS 2014 WDDS than the 1-day recall of the MNDA WDDS to the VLS 2014 WDDS. We failed to reject the hypothesis that the 3-day is collecting the same information as the VLS 2014 WDDS. Both have distributions that are not significantly different from normal for both skewness nor kurtosis. Although we do find that the standard deviations are significantly different, we conclude that the 3-day WDDS and the VLS 2014 WDDS are collecting the same information. And finally, we run the third hypothesis test on the HDDS, find that the means are significantly different through a paired t-test, reject the null hypothesis that they're collecting the same information, and in a comparison of skewness, they're both negatively skewed significantly. Only the 3-day MNDA has significant kurtosis, and the standard deviations are not significantly different. But we do reject the hypothesis that the MNDA 3-day collects the same information as the VLS 2014 HDDS. So the conclusion of our first hypothesis is that the MNDA 24-hour WDDS and the VLS WDDS from 2014 are not collecting the same information. However, the 24-hour HDDS and the VLS HDDS from 2014 are collecting the same information. So the recall periods in this hypothesis are the same. They're both measuring a 24-hour recall period. So it makes sense then that the WDDS would be comparable, and the HDDS would also be comparable, but we find that because the WDDS is not and the HDDS is, we need to look further into that difference of why either the WDDS is or the HDDS is not the same. And we are thinking that one of the major reasons is the difference in the way that these scores are calculated. The VLS method is measuring more general consumption diversity because they are taking into account all of the individual dietary diversity scores, whereas the MNDA is more a measure of access. It would be the same as if the VLS took the highest score of the IDDSs and put that as the household dietary diversity score. So we are expecting that we're going to be measuring a much higher household dietary diversity score than the VLS for this reason. Again, though, we would need to conduct some further tests into this relationship to make that conclusion. The second conclusion having to do with the recall period validation is that for both the WDDS and the household dietary diversity score, the difference between a 24-hour and a 3-day recall is significant. This has implications for further survey design because it means that the survey period the recall period does play a role in the results that are obtained from that survey. Finally, the conclusion of the recall period and the tool validation is that a 3-day recall for women's dietary diversity scores using our method is necessary to yield information similar to that obtained by the 24-hour recall period of the intensive VLS survey. We're not really sure why this is. We'd have to do some further analysis to determine this relationship. But it might have something to do with the fact that our MNDA method is a much more abbreviated method where we don't probe as intensely as the intensive survey, and we're also not measuring as many ingredients as the VLS survey, which goes greatly into depth in terms of analyzing mixed dishes and, probing the woman over and over for the food she ate, whereas we're trying to, do it in a more minimal setting. The VLS surveys take on average 2 hours to do, whereas ours took about an average of 25 minutes. So that could be a reason. But again, for all of these conclusions, we're going to need to do some deeper analysis as to our numbers. But as a whole, based on these results, we can make the conclusion that the MNDA is a promising, has promise in terms of being an adequate measure of dietary diversity as compared to the VLS 2014. Yep, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the limitations to our methodology, our data collection and analysis, as well as the generalizability of our survey instrument as part of the dietary diversity module of the MNDA. So when talking about limitations, the first thing maybe we want to talk about is recall accuracy, kind of a natural limitation when you're doing a household interview. So first off, 3 days worth of recall is difficult for respondents to do, not only because they have to recall everything that they've eaten for the past 3 days, but also for the household as they're designated as a proxy. Responses from other family members can often skew the data, especially when using a proxy. While this might lead to a more comprehensive or collective information, it can also lead to extraneous information. And I think we learned, and I think that many other people who have done household interviews know, is when you single out one person interview, you often interview the family and the whole village too, which is still not as much as the number of cups of chai that we would have to drink at the end of each day, because after we would be doing our household interviews, we would just be inundated with chai. So over-reporting is possible, and under-reporting in incidences where respondents do not wish to disclose information about their diets. And this could be because of any reason from not wishing because of stigma or embarrassment over certain foods consumed or lack of access or whatever that may be. Food items with no English translation require accurate recording and grouping. And as we talked about before, this isn't as much of a limitation as it is a challenge for us. So we just had to do our research with these foods, and we used Padma Jo was really helpful, as was Kavita and Mr. Mohan, in helping us determine what foods go into what categories and what they actually were. So all foods obtained from sources outside of the primary 5 categories, and just to kind of to go over that again, our 6 categories of sources were PDS. This is where people source their ingredients from and their food items. So PDS, local shops, own farm, weekly markets, prepared food, and other. Prepared food and local shops, the difference between those two is local shops would be if they bought certain vegetables or certain ingredients from the shop. While prepared food was something that was obviously already prepared. So whatever that could fall, that could be anything from, again, chai to a curry. And so there are no distinctions in this 6 category, just because there are so many different sources we could include. But at the same time, this means that, and for one example for us, the 6th category was including both foods given as a gift from family members or friends, as well as food sourced from, in one village, it was from a dairy co-op. So all of these different sources that outside the main 5 are all grouped into the 6th source. Outmigration is something to consider when designating a single proxy to measure household dietary diversity. In Dokur specifically, we had 2 women respondents who had who told us that they just returned to the village after working in Hyderabad for the greater extent of a year, for a great portion of time for supplementary income. And while they were away, often the children, they reported that just from qualitative, us gathering qualitative information, many times the children would take over cooking responsibilities. And so these women were all not only, and we just asking around, we found that a lot, we don't know numbers, so we can't give like a number about how many women migrate. But a large population of the women ages 18 to 45 do migrate, and it's often for longer than from 6 months to up to 3 years. So while these two women met all the selection requirements for our household survey, they obviously, or not obviously, but logically could not be a true proxy for the household because they would not know what was being eaten on a daily basis, not only for the past 3 days, but from the majority of time that they were gone working in Hyderabad, for example. Quantifying recording foods. So when there was large disparities between what was consumed by the individual respondents and what was consumed by the household, so because of things such as fasting days or Ramadan, for example, with our Muslim respondents. This led to some challenges for us based on our survey design. We were anticipating to have such disparities between the two, so it was hard to capture, and often we'd have to write in the margins of our survey. So this is just an operational challenge, an operational limitation that we had in our survey design and our focus going in. Foods consumed, we kind of touched on this before, but foods consumed in small quantities were consistently not included for the sake of, because it is a minimum nutrition data set. But we do run the risk, obviously, of if these small quantities of food are consumed frequently enough, then they could be important to capturing the overall dietary diversity scores of the individual respondent. Now, Andy already mentioned this before, but I think it's really important to keep in mind again that seasonality is this big ubiquitous variable affecting our methodology, affecting all of our data analysis or conclusions. And that, again, the ideal for being able to do a comparison between two data sets is to hold them at the same time. So any variables that might skew the data based on, so for example, if we use fasting, fasting is going to be, the differences in like fasting times between the two data sets is again going to fall under seasonality because there might be different fasting like holidays or days that differ between different times of the year when the data was collected. So Ramadan, again, is an example of how that would be different now than it would be for Muslim respondents in the fall. Talking about generalizability, just a quick section, kind of like the conclusive remarks about our survey tool and about the ability of us to integrate this in the MNDA. So we feel that the survey design and methodology can be adapted and applied to many populations. We feel that the use of our FGDs is really good at contextualizing the responses that we get and the information that we have. And that the survey tool, as a nutrition data set, is really a pretty good tool and can be used across people from different backgrounds. So whether you have a nutrition background or not, you're able to navigate and use this tool effectively in your household interviews. In terms of integrating it into the MNDA as a dietary diversity module, we would suggest that further research into our results is necessary to examine the efficacy of using this tool as part of the MNDA. Because of time constraints and because of whatnot, we just think that there would have to be further analysis of the data we collected to be able to make conclusive remarks about what we have seen, and for anybody else looking to go into this same type of study. So now we're going to talk about further areas of interest, specifically with the market module of the dietary of the MNDA. I'll pass it over to Alex.
All right, the market level dietary diversity module. So initially in the MNDA, market assessment was considered critical to contextualizing a local food supply, as well as checking out the diversity of the products that were being offered. We really wanted to know whether the product availability at the markets was going to reflect what the respondents were actually consuming in their homes, since we were collecting source data, and to confirm that. So a survey instrument was designed to capture the characteristics of the respective markets, so the number of total vendors, distance to the nearest town and village, the frequency of the market, as well as the location of the market. Food item lists with the respective food groups were included on the survey, and there was checkboxes so we could go around to the different vendors and confirm that they were in fact selling the items, and there's also space for anecdotal observations to be recorded. We decided not to implement this tool as we believed that the capacity needed to use it at the market would be a little too intensive, particularly at some of these agricultural retail markets where there's over 100 vendors many times. We believed it was too capacity intensive, So we also thought that a list of food items, while important to confirm household consumption, would not elucidate particularly clearly the complex relationships between the markets and what folks were consuming at the household level. So we did conduct informal market visits, however, by visiting 3 retail markets, 2 in Andhra Pradesh and 1 in Maharashtra. We visited the Devrakadra market, which serves Dokor. It's about 7 kilometers away. We visited the Amangol market, serving Arpale, which is about 10 kilometers away, and the Tijapur market, serving Kinked and Kanzara, which is 12 kilometers away and 9 kilometers away, respectively. Both the Amangol and Tijapur markets were Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee, or had the presence of them. So there was increased wholesaler and trader activity in the area. As the new qualitative methods were introduced, we actually walked around the market, wrote down a list of the food items just to confirm what was there. And we also tried to conduct semi-structured interviews with market representatives with the help of the ICRISAT staff that was with us, as well as the field representatives, or field enumerators. So market observations. All the markets were retail in nature and were a mix of direct-to-consumer vendors and traders. There was evidence of wholesale and assembly activity. For example, in Amangol, there was a lot of neem collection going on, neem assembly going on. Devrakadra had a very large livestock market, and Tijapur had assorted vegetables and red chilies being aggregated and retailed. There's also evidence of some grains and pulses being sold in these retail markets, as well as fish, non-veg, and we also witnessed some value-added processing activities, namely around pickle, mango pickle in particular. There was a limited physical infrastructure. Most of the vendors had temporary shelters. There was some evidence of permanent shelters as well, concrete roads surrounding the markets, and some limited transportation. We managed to conduct a semi-structured interview in Tijapur with agent regulating the market. He mentioned that it was about 15 rupees a day for a vendor to come and enter and sell, and the revenue supported the lease of the land for the market. The vendors and traders came from the surrounding 25 villages, and that they did regulate minimum prices set for each of the products. We also managed to interview the secretary of the local APMC there as well, and he provided a great background on their wholesale markets, but was not able to speak particularly well about the retail markets. So this chart right here is across villages, and we're going to continue doing work on this in the fall. But it's broadly the percentage of the food groups consumed on the left, and the source on the bottom that Christian was speaking about. So local vendor here refers to local village shops, which typically have processed and packaged goods, as well as vegetables. And other, as Christian mentioned, consist of dairy cooperative, in-kind payments, gifts. I think it's important to note here, and this is where seasonality also plays a very big part, but over 60% and close to 70% of the vegetables were purchased at the market. With the late rains this year, that shouldn't be overly surprising. However, the non-veg items were purchased from local vendors, usually in the village, and we also had respondents tell us quite frequently that people would retail vegetables and fruits also at these shops associated with packaged products. So further research needs to be taken to study that. So the market level assessment in MNDA, we believe that the market data collection instrument in its original form with just a list of food items was not necessary to speak further about the dietary diversity. It didn't bring up more further clarity in regards to particular supply. As Christian mentioned with the source codes, we were able to get a lot of information from our respondents about whether the products were on farm, whether they're purchased at the market. It was helpful in kind of gaining a better understanding of the relationships and the actors participating in the market, as well as like the local contexts. But we found the respondents to provide actually quite a bit of information that was correct regarding those source codes. So we believe that further research and further work needs to be done on refining those source codes and potentially adding more source codes to confirm that information. And we also believe that the market level assessment should be refined further to add more concrete indicators, maybe just more research to see what further relationships could be built. And I think it's also important to note that many of our respondents in our focus group interviews mentioned that there was a bit of consumption coming from common properties still, so lots of rabbit being consumed, foraging for leafy green vegetables and mushrooms when seasonally appropriate, as well as consumption of wild boar. It's something that came up in all the villages, but we did not see that in the markets, and we rarely capture that information in our surveys. So again, we believe also that vegetable value chains and learning, how much spinach that we grow in our villages first is quite important in future research. And we would like to thank Dr. Pingali, Dr. Bantalan, Katie Ricketts, Ms. Padmaja, Ms. Kavita, Ms. Mohan Rao, Ms. Padmaja, Ms. Haja, Ms. Anupama, our enumerators, as well as Mary Kathryn and Bhaskar and Shankar. And we've had a really great time, and we've learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all five of you.
One correction, that those weren't ladyfingers, that was bitter gourd. And I think we had some people in the audience note that difference, so that was a mistake on our part. Sorry.
So I think this is quite a unique presentation where we have 5 interns. Usually they're given 1 hour each for their seminars, but this is quite unique. They thought about it, given that they were working on the same topic with some overlapping questions and hypotheses. This is really a good initiative to share and have synthesized perspective of your results. Now, I'm sure that there will be questions regarding the methodology. Anna already asked initial questions a while ago. So let me open the floor for questions and answers. Partner.
I think a very absorbing seminar, learning experience. Now, my question is regarding the seasonality aspect that you mentioned. I do not know if I understood all your studies between the VDSC data and the data under this module, because that was collected in February, as you mentioned, and this is in June or July. So the question is, there is distinct variation in consumption patterns across seasons, summer, winter, rainy season. I think from other studies or earlier study done even at ICRISAT, you can see what kind of differences exist between the seasons. It's quite likely that you're capturing, the two are not giving very different results if you somehow build in the seasonal aspect. For example, if you assume that in winter, the hypothesis that winter they consume more, and they consume more of X, Y, Z food stuff, then if it's not reflected in your data, obviously there is a seasonal effect. So I thought the seasonal factor can be brought in, and you'll find more synergy between the two data sets.
Of course, that's something we would like to look into more. We actually did have access also to the VLS 2013 survey, which was conducted from the beginning of August to October. So that was a survey that was more in line with the seasonality of the surveys that we conducted, and did find many significant differences as well. And the differences between the 2013 and the 2014 VLSs were significant. So I think that just speaks to more of significant differences of these surveys and of people's recall periods, but just, we did take seasonality into account when looking at these differences.
Yes, Anna, follow it up. I'm still in a quandary because I don't know really how minimum is minimum. Because, like you presented a 3-day data against a 1-day data. You were trying to compare them. And I know that, and you were saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is such huge difference between a 3-day data and a 1-day data. Now, my question really is, I think it will have to depend exactly on what your objective is, so that you will, and then your choice of whether to go for 3-day or 1-day. Because even you were saying that you did not include market information, and it's not working. So I think, again, that brings me back to my question. Do we really need a minimum data indicators for market information so that it gives us really a good scenario in terms of what we really would like to see? So that's just something flagging it.
So are you asking if we need a minimum indicator for the market module or for dietary diversity
The market
and nutrition?
thing,
Okay.
as it relates to, because you were looking into sources as well and other things, right?
Right.
So do we really need an information on this thing, or do we just have to drop it completely because we're just really looking at a minimum data set?
Right. I think we found here that the respondents were quite accurate in reporting the source codes of what they were consuming, and that's one of the primary reasons we decided to at least write down the list, just to see if there was any gaps. I think in its current form, it's probably unnecessary, but in different contexts, when I think about different ethnic groups and different groups and local communities, that maybe the markets will have more diversity that isn't being consumed by the study population, perhaps. And it also, regarding prepared foods and processed foods, we're at the markets, and maybe looking at the trends of that maybe increases over time could be appropriate, but only if capacity is there to do it.
And in terms of operationally, capturing the source code was just a minor addition to our survey. So when we were asking them about the foods, it was just a quick additional question and didn't add a lot of time to our actual surveys. So that is a really, even if it's not relevant specifically to dietary diversity, capturing the source codes was just a very quick additional set of data that we were able to capture.
Thank you. Congratulations on excellent presentation. Only one thing is that rightly Dr. Prasad rightly pointed out, seasonality is very important. If you see the prices of vegetables are nearly 5 times compared to February to present. That makes a lot of difference in the consumption pattern of those foods. If you see the storing, that is very less. Because they are substituting the vegetables which are very low cost compared to the March and April. Now take up the vegetables of potato, tomato, all these things are up to 80 rupees now, which are available at only 15 rupees in the March. That is one important point. Second thing is the village profile you have mentioned, Avrupani don't go. Andhra Pradesh, which is now Telangana.
Yeah,
That is please say it. Yeah. And another important thing is we have collected a lot of information from 8 focus group meetings which are really confirming the data given by the individual households. You are not much focused on that in your presentation.
That will capture
Yeah.
the focus group
Yes,
meeting
right.
results.
Right. Thank you.
So about the seasonality, I was thinking how to address the seasonality. Further mention earlier. I think one option is because the time is not possible now, but maybe doing same type of, one to do same type of analysis in October, November when the July data is ready. Then see the July that you have calculated to 24 hours or 3 days are consistent with the previous data, or comparison with the last year 2013 July, because the seasonality, the consumption pattern will not change that much like income, other things. So instead of doing the April, the February, March that you did, it would have been better to do 2013, or maybe doing similar type by similar type of analysis by Padmada later on in October, November when we have the July data of 2014 ready. And then the comparison is more consistent that address the seasonality issues that Partha I was also thinking how to manage. The other thing is in case of the diversities of food consumption and the nutrition comes to the core issue, how correctly they correlate the conceptually, the diversity and the nutrition. Because within the cereal box, suppose cereal commodity, we have ragi, millet, others sorghum, this thing, and rice, wheat also. made. So among the cereal also, there's a lot of variation in terms of nutrition, these things. So those diversity, high diversity always means more nutrition, or on the hypothetically, that is the question. I mean, conceptually I'm not clear on that, because there is a, if that is not, correlation is not 99 or 0.9, then whole, it raise question on the methodology. That why I'm saying this, there is a continuum, income continuum path. Suppose in a society, the lower development society considered in economic development, tribal, mountainside, interior, the food consumption diversity will be high by nature, by default. But nutrition will be low, the total calorie consumption will be low. Their overall nutrition status is low, but they I have seen, they consume lot of diversity of food. That's good. But middle income, when people go, then the diversity will decrease. And again, high income society, because of people, the value of the life is more, the nutrition more, they try to diversify more. So that, how to capture that part?
Yeah.
Let's collect more questions and then we will ask the Yeah. So let's collect. There's one thing that I'd like to follow up. In the presentation, as expected, we naturally looked at statistics, including the means, the implicit means, kurtosis, and so on, and more concentration on that. I would advise in improving the presentation of your results, look and have a retrospective view of what's the meaning of this information. Okay. For example, you deal with the comparison of one-day recall and three-day recall, and then you're measuring diversity. Okay. Naturally, on a basis of setting a hypothesis, you would say that as you cover more hours or more days, there is a tendency to have more diversity. So if I were a lady of the household, usually I would market for the whole week, right? And I would buy my vegetables, my meat, and so on, and distribute the consumption pattern throughout the week and what basket of food. So if I am making a measurement, this is a question of measurement now, and corresponding to that is the meaning of that measurement. When you have a one-day recall, naturally you will have a coverage of one-day food consumption. When you have a three-day recall, you naturally will now capture. If we have a mother who's planning a food consumption over a day, then one day would cover so much, but 3 days would cover more. So there is a tendency for you to expect that there will be higher diversity.
And that is why.
Think about that.
Right.
Okay, you'll have a chance to answer later on.
Okay.
Another one is, before I left, I remember we had a late debate regarding market day. And we had a measurement with respect relative to market day. And I think we thought we resolved that we would have a very strict reference to the concept of the market day, right? So I'd like to know what has happened to that. So there are issues which reflects on the interpretation using your statistics, your difference between your means and kurtosis with respect to different methodology. But now that you've done that, you've done it well, look at the meaning so that you don't lose track of the actual meaning of those results as they reflect those statistics. Okay, I have two more hands and then we'll select Padma and I saw one question. Padma.
This is not a question. The first one is not a question, but it's referring to values about the seasonality. The fourth round of dietary diversity of the survey is happening. So we would be collecting information during this period of July, August, and September. So then we can compare the results. So because it's happening, we could not give them the data, but we gave the first 3 rounds data. So then at least they can see some kind of a matching or a difference. So that's being good. But to compare exactly as we have said seasonality, like this is the period of Ramzan, and there's a lot of fasting happening. So you could see the diversity. So when the fourth round data comes in, then we can compare this minimum MNDA data and the intensive round data and see if there's differences or we still reject some of the hypotheses or the accuracy. So that we can still vendors turn around and pay price. Second, on the market day recall, maybe we initially wanted to include the market day, a 3-day recall plus. If the 3 days does not include the market day, then we thought we would be having the market day. But we realized that the timing of the data collection, the market day will be like a week before, so it becomes very difficult for the respondent to remember what they were, like what they bought from the market and all. So that's the reason why we dropped the market days in this particular, because the way the data collection period was planned, we found that they will not be able to get many households to be interviewed where there is a market day included in that. So that was one of the reasons.
And just to add to that, we didn't completely drop the market day in that we added a checkbox in the top left corner for the 3 special days, so market day, special day like a wedding, and fasting. So if they went to a market on one of the 3 days, it's indicated in the survey, and we can do analysis later based on that.
Let's have a chance to accumulate and think about the questions asked by Madhu, Anna, and others, and I think Prabhu will also like to contribute. So you have a chance now.
Okay. Well, just to respond to your question about or your idea that we think more about the use of the 3-day recall. In fact, just speaking exactly to what you mentioned about being the woman of the household and distributing the foods over the course of the week, there have been many papers that say just that. And the one that comes to mind is a paper by Marie Ruel, who said that, or who found that the greatest increase in diversity of foods consumed occurs between the first day and the 3rd day. And really, those papers were the ones that we used to justify our use of the 3-day recall over the 24-hour recall. And we were finding, from our findings from the Women's Dietary Diversity Score, that was actually happening, right? Because we were able to record so many more foods consumed in the 3 days as opposed to the 1 day. So that's to speak to your point.
So who would you like to add?
You guys have anything else?
Yeah.
Is there something we didn't address that we were asked?
The seasonality question. Yeah, that was. Did you have anything?
No, so let me just say a few things. One, I think the seasonality issue is really important, and I'm glad that you're doing the intensive survey so we can actually check against that to address that. That's a really big issue to come back to. On the issue of diet diversity and its proxy for nutrition, now the literature is really well established on this. There's really solid econometric results to show that where diet diversity scores are high, nutrition status of the household is also high. And in fact, many nutritionists are now saying just do diet diversity scores, don't bother with all the other nutrition measures. I refer you to Lawrence Haddad, Marie Ruel, and others who say that. I don't fall into that camp. I still think there's a need for an outcome measurement, but that relationship is now fairly well established. I wonder about the idea that tribal populations are more diverse. We have to. This is an empirical question. People say that a lot, but I have not actually seen enough data. And the reason you miss this is, not you as in Madhu, but in general, we as people, is because of the way data is collected. Because a lot of times data is collected in terms of food groups that we normally think of as regular food groups, but like wild boar consumption. WDDS doesn't ask wild boar consumption, right? But wild boar consumption is happening. And so we're missing out on some of those traditional foods and bush meat and things like that, which could still be happening, which we're not capturing. But let me go to where we're going from here. So what this group of interns are going to spend next semester doing a research seminar with me. And during that semester, they will do a more intense analysis of all of this work, and we'll be able to provide a more detailed set of papers coming out at the end of that semester. So there's a lot more we are doing in pursuing this discussion. We also see that, as far as I'm concerned, this has been a very successful experiment. Right? We sent a bunch of young students from Cornell over to say, go and live in a village and collect data and see what you can come up with. And I think Padmaja has done very intensive survey, and for me to say, well, here's our results are not significantly different from your results is a significant finding for me. Right? So then we can say, so there's potential to scale this up to other locations, but it's also important for me to say now I can have a series of Cornell interns coming here, picking up different issues and adding to the VDSA. Well, 2 months. And then of course we also have our PhD students who will be coming in. So this is exciting for us that we've started a process that we hope can build into a long-term relationship between Cornell and ICRISAT, especially the economics program. I don't know, you call it something different.
Still economics.
Still economics program. So in that respect, I'm really delighted with the work that was done, and I see great potential for the future.
Okay, great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next and last part is a very short presentation of certificates, which our LSU, Learning Systems Unit, actually has made preparations. These are yet to be signed, so you can say it's already signed.
Oh, wow.
Okay, right, that's good. So, but the real presentation, formal one, will be, as I was told, it's on Wednesday. So this is a mock, just so we will be able to actually make this presentation and photography in place. So this will be short, but we would like to call on Prabhu and Anna, please, and Padma, please come to the front.
Why
What
is mock?
about you? You're
Because
the
we
one.
have yet to
I
receive
should
your
just say
report. And once we have gotten your report, then we can have the real thing.
This is a condition, right?
Amrita, I don't have to tell the content. Yeah. Kathryn Merekel.
This is to capture the ceremony with Prabhu.
This is actually a DiRado-Ownes.
Alright. Call you Chris? Or Adi?
And then the last but not the least, Nathaniel Alexis Cardova. So we can have a drink.
The reason why we have it here so that we have the witness of everybody. And this is how you, by the way, all over the world. Yeah, it is beautiful.